example. It's fascinating. Great. So now we have time for we have the third speaker. So this third speaker is Dr. Felix Michnacs from the company Tetec, a German company. And now we are addressing a slightly different area, which is regenerative medicine. Felix, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So thank you very much for the invitation to present our experiences in the clinical development of advanced therapy medicinal products in Europe. Tetec is a shared company of B. Braun Melsungen, and this B. Braun is not that company which is producing shavers and toothbrushes. We are one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, and we are private owned. The great tragedy of science is the slaying hand of beautiful hypothesis and an ugly act. This slaying hand is most of the cases here in Europe and in all the other areas of the world, regulatory and money nowadays in the development of medicines and medicinal products. Just to give you an orientation where we are, I talk about advanced therapy medicinal products, so we have different types of those products, and we are producing pharmaceuticals, tissue-engineered products for the regenerative medicine of cartilage defects or disc diseases. What makes it to a pharmaceutical? That is the big question. On the one hand side, you have in most of the cases a medical device, which is a carrier, and afterwards you bring in the active ingredient, which is in our case the cell from human origin. 2007, the European Commission provides to the scientific and clinical environment this great guideline, which finally rules that every medicinal product, which is named as advanced therapy medicinal product, needs a centralized procedure to achieve the marketing authorization in Europe. What does that mean? That means simply that you have to conduct safety and efficacy studies from phase 1 to phase 3. This is finally what you provide to the European Commission. This is the common technical document, which has in most of the cases more than 30,000 pages. And you have to provide all the data which comes out of biological and technical development, preclinical and clinical development, and in vitro, in vivo, and finally in the clinical phases in human models. And afterwards, if you have the marketing authorization, you have to provide continuous data about safety for the product. We have a special thing in the advanced therapy medicinal products. The carrier material don't need a CE certification, which is a completely different process in Europe. It is not obligated, but it makes it easier finally when you achieve for the central market approval from the medicinal products from the ETPN, but it is not obligated. You just have to meet the essential requirements of the medical device directive. It's different to the instruments and tools that you use for the application of that advanced therapy medicinal product. So we use our advanced therapy medicinal products in the indication of orthopedics and trauma surgery and neurosurgery. So that means that you have surgeon instruments and tools, and these instruments and tools and also application systems needs to be CE certified. All the systems we use are own developed, and we have the CE certification for. Now I would like to show you the development experience of 2 trials just to complete my session. So I talk about phase 1 to phase 4 trials. The first product we develop currently is a combined ATMP, which is used for degenerative disc disease and adjacent disc disease, which is a really big market in the whole world. In every country you have a huge population of people which have problems in her back. This is a study, it's a combined prospective randomized multicenter study in 10 sites in 2 countries. We want to recruit 120 patients, and we have a follow-up period of 5 years after surgery. The phase 1 is successfully completed and reported, and we have the authorization to conduct the phase 2 currently. After that, we have to conduct a phase 3 study, and hopefully the data that we then will have fits to the requirements of the European Medicines Agency. Just to give you an impression of the project schedule or history, study design, so that was the time point for the product that it was ready for clinical development. So that means all the studies in preclinical areas were done and documented. And it starts with a study design in the third quarter of 2009. After this time point, we conduct 2 scientific advices at our national competent authority. This is obligated. You cannot run a clinical trial for the market authorization for a medicinal product without a scientific advice of the competent authority, which is then finally, in most of the cases, one of the rapporteurs at the European Medicines Agency when you submit the common technical document for the market authorization. Clinical trial setup follows, so CRO selection. CRO is the abbreviation for Clinical Research Organization, country selection with feasibility studies, and finally site selection of the involved clinics. And then we start with a clinical study 2 years later with trial submission, site initiation, and patient enrollment. The second study we run is a phase 3 study. With a ATMP for the treatment of cartilage defects in the knee, mainly in the knee, but also other joints, but mainly in the knee. It's a 7-country, 25-site studies to recruit 260 patients. And in parallel, we run a study in the US in 25 sites to recruit a bit more than 230 patients, because we do not want only to have the market authorization in Europe, we also want to have it in the US. This is the project schedule for this big project. It was starting with a briefing book used in 3 scientific advice meetings at our competent authorities. Clinical trial setup starts in the last quarter of 2010, and study conduct starts in the second quarter of 2012. So nearly 4 years preparation time to the time point for the first patient in that study. These are some experience we made in different countries. So in Austria and Germany, you need for every clinical site which is involved in a clinical study a tissue harvest approval, because the cell is a part of the manufacturing process and is regulated by GMP regulations. So these sites need a special approval, and to achieve this approval will take 3 to 12 months for every clinic. It's a mess of documentation which needs to be provided to the local authority to achieve these approvals. For nearly every site, you need a study nurse. If that site do not have an own study nurse, you have to provide it as the sponsoring partner. And for every site, you need finally to conduct this clinical trial for about 0.3 full-time equivalent people. What is really difficult in Germany and Austria is submission and amendments for the clinical conduct. So it is a really huge documentation which needs to be provided to achieve from the ethics committee and competent authority for special pharmaceuticals the approval for running clinical trials. For this preparation, you need 1 FTE for about 3 months, which is then obligated to provide this documentation. In Germany, we have the special situation that a part of GMP is also logistics. So that means you need a certified partner, which is able to do supplies within the GMP framework. Finally, you have to fulfill inspections and documentations from the competent authority. This is quite usual in Germany, also in medical device clinical trials, but it is much more important in Austria. On the sponsor side, you need a project management study coordination, 3 FTEs for this 1 clinical trial. In France, we have a very special situation what concerns to clinical trial approval and ethics, because you have the ANSM as the national authority, the ethics committee, and the CLINAM, which is responsible for declaring all the things which are important for the reimbursement for the investigators which are involved in the study. So this is an own institution, would give you an approval that the contract that you will have finally with the clinical side is okay, and meets to the requirements from tax and ethics and all that things. It took more than 9 months to do a successful submission. In parallel, you have to provide study nurses and special educations to the clinical science. You have a different IMPD format. This is the documentation for the pharmaceutical itself. And in France, we have special requirements what chapters need to be documented and all that stuff. In France, you have that special situation that you need a tissue bank for the donor qualification of your origin material for the GMP manufacturing process. So you are not able, as a GMP producer, a pharmaceutical company in Germany, to produce advanced therapy medicinal products in France. You need a special certified tissue bank which is able to qualify your donors. You have a special requirements on quality control within the manufacturing process. And this here completely leads to the fact that you have to build up own processes. They need to be validated with contracts and all that stuff. It took 1.5 years for us to produce this process with our partner in France. And finally, you need a local CRO in France. Don't try to run a clinical study in France without a local CRO. It is not possible. Full stop. In Switzerland, the most important thing I want to address is here submission and amendments. Here in Switzerland, it is a special situation. Before you can submit a dossier to the competent authority, you need ethical approval. So what will happen? You will achieve for the ethical approval, you have it, will submit the documentation to the competent authority, and then the competent authority has some questions or changes. Then you have to change the documentation, but that leads to the fact that you have to resubmit for an ethical approval. So you have to do the ethical approval again and to resubmit the documentation to the competent authority, and back and forth. And that leads 11 months in Switzerland to achieve the approval for that study. In Switzerland, you need a legal representative, so it is not able to, for a sponsor in Germany or in other European countries, to run a clinical study. You need a legal representative which is placed in Switzerland. And this is in our case not that difficult because we have our country affiliate. So I will close my presentation with some experience from UK. It was the best experience we made. I just can conclude this. If we have the possibility, if we would have the possibility to run the clinical trials only in UK, we will do it. You have a very good cooperation with the competent authority and with the ethics committee as well. It was a really high experience discussion and collaboration with these institutions, and it was really a great experience we made to initiate that trial in UK. So conclusion, you need experienced staff. That is very important on the sponsor side. You need experienced staff in regulatory aspects. 80% of the questions from the dossier to the competent authority concerns to quality and manufacturing. Quality control is the most important thing. You need local partners in Poland, France, and Czech. You need an own standing support for achieving a tissue harvest approval from the clinical sites. And finally, and that will be the last slide, you need a highly motivated team, and we'll close my presentation with this quote from the most successful basketball trainer in the world, Phil Jackson: "The strength of the team is the individual member, and the strength of each member is the team." And the last word is reimbursement. Thank you for listening. My name is Felix Michnacs.
Okay, thank you.